Welcome to St. Catherine, the historic home of Dr. Samuel Alexander Mudd. Dr. Mudd was the Southern Maryland doctor and tobacco farmer who was arrested, tried, and convicted for conspiring with John Wilkes Booth to assassinate President Abraham Lincoln and aiding and abetting Booth after the fact. Dr. Mudd was sentenced to life in prison, however he was pardoned just 3 years and 8 months later. Dr. Mudd was born on December 20th, 1833 at Oak Hill, his father's estate located about 1/4 of a mile east of where you are now. The Mudds were wealthy tobacco farmers who utilized enslaved laborers to work their expansive property. Due to the family's wealth, young Sam and his siblings were tutored at their home. When Sam turned 15, he attended St. John's College in Frederick, Maryland. Sam was withdrawn from St. John's after 2 years in favor of entering Georgetown College. However, he was expelled for allegedly leading a student rebellion during his second year at Georgetown. Returning home to Charles County without a diploma, Sam became an apprentice to Dr. George Mudd, a relative and local doctor. After 2 years as an apprentice, Dr. George Mudd helped Sam gain admission to the University of Maryland's medical department in Baltimore in 1854. During his time at the University of Maryland's medical department, Sam earned a reputation as an outstanding student. He was rewarded by being selected to work in the school's infirmary. Only a small handful of students were given this honor. Sam gained experience working with patients sick with yellow fever during this time. This experience would ultimately come in handy in the years of his imprisonment. It would be Dr. Mudd's actions in helping treat patients during an outbreak of yellow fever while imprisoned at Fort Jefferson, Dry Tortugas Island, Florida, that would ultimately earn him a pardon in 1869. Sam finished his medical schooling by successfully completing his dissertation on dysentery. He graduated as a licensed medical doctor in March of 1856. Dr. Mudd returned home and established a practice in the Bryantown area. He also intensified his courtship of a local girl named Sarah Frances Dyer. Years before, she promised to marry Sam after he became, quote, all doctored up. That time came on Thanksgiving Day, 1857. The two were wed at the home of Sarah's brother, Jeremiah. Jeremiah owned and operated the Dyer family farm, located about a mile west of where you are now. The newlywed couple lived at the Dyer farm while construction of St. Catherine took place. Construction of the main house and small out kitchen was completed in 1859. The middle portion of the house, the hyphen where the gift shop is now located, was not added until the summer of 1864. When Dr. and Mrs. Mudd moved into their new home, the first of their 9 children had already been born. They were also joined by a widow woman who was likely a relative of Mrs. Mudd. Finally, the Mudds brought 5 enslaved laborers to the farm with them. In all, Dr. Mudd was given the northern 218 acres of his father's estate to manage and make profitable. By 1861, Dr. Mudd and his older brother were helping their father manage nearly 1,500 acres of property and enslaving nearly 100 African Americans. This made the family one of the wealthiest in the region. They were proponents of the institution of slavery and did not support the Lincoln administration. Dr. Mudd never offered his services to either side during the war. When he was drafted into the Union Army in the summer of 1864, his father promptly paid for a substitute to take his place. Dr. Mudd continued to operate his medical practice out of his home and manage the agricultural production of the farm throughout the duration of the war. John Wilkes Booth began formulating a plan to take action against President Lincoln by August of 1864. Booth was an ardent supporter of the Confederacy and a fervent racist. He, like Dr. Mudd, had not joined either army during the war. By the summer of 1864, Booth felt compelled to take action for the Confederacy. Rather than pick up a musket, Booth decided to adopt a plan to kidnap Lincoln in the vicinity of Washington. From there, he planned to whisk the captured president to Richmond and turn him over to Confederate authorities. Booth hoped that the Confederate government would use Lincoln as a bargaining chip to secure the release of thousands of Confederate prisoners of war from northern prison camps. In August, Booth recruited 2 childhood friends from Baltimore, Michael O'Laughlin and Sam Arnold, into the kidnapping conspiracy. Booth also needed contacts in Prince George's and Charles counties to help him find a route of safe passage to the Potomac and into Virginia. In October 1864, Booth spent several days in Montreal, Canada, meeting with members of the Confederate Secret Service. He was given the name of at least one prominent doctor in Charles County, Dr. William Queen. It's possible that he may also have been given the name of Dr. Samuel A. Mudd while in Montreal, but the historical record is clouded on this point. While Booth was in Canada, major changes were underway in the state of Maryland. A special election was held to vote on the ratification of a controversial new constitution that, among other things, would abolish slavery in the state forever. It also aimed to reallocate political representation based on white population only. These changes would be felt the hardest in those counties with the highest percentages of enslaved laborers, such as Charles County. Initial poll results showed that the new constitution was voted down. However, after counting absentee ballots from Maryland soldiers in the Union Army, the new constitution passed by a few hundred votes. The new constitution took effect at midnight, November 1st, 1864. At that moment, Dr. Mudd and many of his neighbors lost a large percentage of their wealth in enslaved laborers who were now set free. Additionally, they would have to pay for laborers to make their farms productive. Just 8 days later, Abraham Lincoln won re-election, further souring the mood of Southern Marylanders. John Wilkes Booth knew that this would be the perfect time to make his first foray into Charles County. Booth knew the political, social, and economic turmoil caused by Maryland's new constitution and Lincoln's re-election would provide him the best opportunity to find people in Southern Maryland who would be sympathetic to his abduction plan. Booth traveled by stagecoach from Washington to Bryantown on November 11th. He stayed at the home of Dr. William Queen, whose name he had obtained during his trip to Montreal. On November 13th, Booth attended St. Mary's Catholic Church. It was here that he was first introduced to Dr. Samuel A. Mudd. According to Mudd, Booth asked him about land and horses that may be for sale in the area. The conversation was brief, and the two parted ways. Booth soon returned to Washington. Booth continued to plan his abduction of President Lincoln. In mid-December, he decided to return to Charles County. During this trip, he again met Dr. Mudd, only this time it was at his home. Booth spent a night with the Mudds and purchased a horse from one of Mudd's neighbors the next morning. There is evidence that Mudd may have introduced Booth to Thomas Harbin at the tavern in Bryantown during this visit to Charles County. Harbin was a Charles County native and a member of the Confederate Underground who specialized in crossing the blockaded Potomac River into Virginia. A man like Harbin would be essential in planning an escape route for the abduction plan. Booth then returned to Washington. Just a few days later, on December 23, 1864, Dr. Mudd traveled to Washington to procure a wood stove for Mrs. Mudd's Christmas present. While checking out the shops and restaurants on Pennsylvania Avenue, Dr. Mudd ran into John Wilkes Booth. According to Mudd, the meeting was, quote, casual or accidental. Booth was looking for an introduction to a man that Mudd knew. 19th century social etiquette dictated that a gentleman be introduced to a stranger by a mutual party who would vouchsafe their reputation. Mudd attempted to beg off, but Booth persisted. Mudd then asked the identity of the person Booth would like to meet. Booth told him John Surratt, Jr. Mudd knew Surratt, but did not know how to find him in the city. Booth reassured Mudd that he had an address where he was sure that they would find Surratt. Mudd then offered an excuse that he was in a rush to meet a relative for dinner, but Booth assured him it would take less than 10 minutes. Mudd gave in, and the two men started walking towards the address that Booth had for Surratt. Before they reached their destination, Dr. Mudd spotted John Surratt and another man walking down the opposite side of 7th Street. Mudd called for Surratt to join him and Booth. Surratt, along with the man he was traveling with, complied. Mudd introduced Surratt to Booth. In turn, Surratt introduced his friend Louis Wakeman to the group. Booth invited all three back to his hotel room at the National for cigars and drinks. While in Booth's room, Dr. Mudd insisted that the actor again wanted to discuss property and horses for sale in Southern Maryland. Mudd felt uneasy about introducing Booth to Surratt and called him into the hallway to privately apologize. Louis Wakeman remembered things differently when he testified in the conspiracy trial. Wakeman recalled that Booth, Mudd, and Surratt had discussions about roadways in Southern Maryland and believed that they had been drawing maps on slips of paper. He remembered that all three men went into the hallway for an extended private discussion, leaving him alone in the room. The party broke up after about an hour. Mudd purchased his stove the next day and returned home in time for Christmas. John Wilkes Booth spent the remainder of the winter building a team to carry out his abduction plan. In addition to his friends Michael O'Laughlin and Samuel Arnold, Booth added John Surratt, George Atzerodt, David Harold, and Lewis Powell to the group. An attempt was made to kidnap Lincoln on March 17, 1865, but the president's schedule had changed and he did not arrive at the planned ambush site. Several of the team members quit the scheme, feeling that their plot had been discovered. Booth was in the process of planning another attempt when the war broke out into the spring campaign season. Richmond fell on April 3rd, and Robert E. Lee surrendered the Army of Northern Virginia at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th. With the Confederate government on the run and the South's biggest military threat neutralized, Booth decided that his plan to kidnap would no longer work. Instead, he wanted to do something so bold that it would cause the Confederates who had surrendered to retake arms and go back out into the field. On April 14, 1865, Booth learned that the president would attend that evening's performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater. He spent the day meeting with his remaining conspirators. He planned a simultaneous triple assassination of President Lincoln, Vice President Andrew Johnson, and the Secretary of State William H. Seward, in an effort to decapitate the federal government. At 10:30 that evening, the conspirators struck. Booth shot Lincoln and escaped the theater and then the city. He met up with fellow conspirator David Harold in Maryland, and the two began following the escape route intended for the kidnapping plot. At midnight, they briefly stopped at the Surratt Tavern and then continued south into Charles County. Around 3:30 a.m., the pair crossed the county line. Realizing that the sun would be rising and suffering from a broken leg, Booth made the decision to detour off the intended route and head to Dr. Mudd's farm, just 3 miles away. The duo rode up the same driveway you entered upon your arrival here today and entered the front yard in desperate need of help. We would like to thank you for your visit today. Please report to the gift shop a few minutes prior to the official start time of your tour. We hope you enjoy your tour of St. Catherine and look forward to future visits.